always thought the worst betrayal a parent could face would be hearing their child say, "I hate you." I was wrong. One quiet Thursday afternoon, my 28-year-old daughter stood in my living room, eyes gleaming, and declared, "You'll give me the insurance money, Dad. It's only fair, after all I crashed your car." It wasn't a request. It was a demand. As if the years of sacrifices, tuition payments, rent help, and countless bailouts meant nothing more than her next payday. I just stared at her, coffee mug halfway to my lips, trying to decide which was more shocking, the fact she'd totaled my car while I was out of town, or the sheer audacity of thinking I'd reward her for it. See, I wasn't always the kind of man who could say no to his little girl. For nearly 3 decades, I'd been the fixer, the problem solver, the ATM she didn't have to thank. But that day, something in me shifted. She thought I'd just hand over the payout, pat her on the head, and tell her to be more careful next time. She had no idea that behind my calm expression, I was already mapping out a different plan, one that would turn her smug confidence into the kind of fear you can't fake. And here's the thing. This wasn't just about a car or even the money. This was about respect, the kind that's earned, not demanded. It was about teaching her a truth that, apparently, 28 years of parenting hadn't gotten through. Actions have consequences. By the end of this story, my daughter would understand that in the most unforgettable way possible. And she'd never look at me or the word family the same way again. Emily wasn't always like this. There was a time when she'd climb into my lap after school, her tiny hands clutching a crayon drawing, and beam with pride as she told me, "I made this for you, Daddy." Back then, her world was simple. Scraped knees, birthday cakes, bedtime stories. But somewhere between college tuition and her first credit card, something shifted. The sweet little girl I raised grew into a woman who believed life owed her something. And if life didn't pay up, she expected me to. For years I played along. I covered her temporary rent shortfalls, paid off credit card balances she promised to handle herself, and even co-signed on her first car loan. When she quit jobs without notice because they were too stressful, I swallowed my frustration and wrote another check. Sarah, my late wife, warned me. "Alex," she'd say, folding laundry while I balanced bills, "we're not helping her by shielding her from consequences. We're teaching her she can escape them." I told myself she was just being harsh, that Emily would grow out of it, that someday she'd thank me for all the times I swooped in to save her. But the truth was uglier. I was enabling her. After Sarah's passing, Emily's requests became more frequent and more entitled. It was as if she saw my grief as a new resource she could tap into. "Dad, I need $200 for groceries." "Dad, my car broke down. I need $1,000 by Friday." "Dad, the landlord's being unfair. Can you just cover this month's rent?" I told myself it was temporary, that if I just helped her get over this one hurdle, she'd stand on her own. But the hurdles kept coming, and I kept paying. Then came the day she stormed into my house, mascara streaking down her face, and demanded $5,000, or she wouldn't survive. I tried to explain about the medical bills from Sarah's last months, the uncertainty at my job, the fact that I simply didn't have that kind of money lying around. She didn't hear a word. Instead, she spat out words that stung more than I expected. "You don't love me anymore." That moment stayed with me. The look in her eyes, the way she weaponized guilt as easily as most people breathe. But I held my ground. For the first time in years I told her no. She left without another word. And for 3 days, I tried to focus on my upcoming business trip to New York. I told myself she'd cool off, that maybe, just maybe, this would be the wake-up call she needed. I had no idea she was already planning something far darker. While I was in New York presenting to the board, Emily wasn't struggling to survive. She was in my driveway, taking a baseball bat to my car. Not in a fit of rage, but with cold, methodical precision. Windshield first. Then the hood. Then moving around the vehicle like she was following a blueprint for destruction. When I came home late that night, my Ford Explorer sat under the streetlight looking less like a car and more like a crime scene. Glass glittered on the pavement, tires hung in ribbons, and deep scratches spelled out a message I couldn't quite read, but didn't need to. And still, I didn't suspect her. I thought maybe it was a targeted act by someone else. A neighbor dispute. Random vandalism. But Emily. Well, not my daughter. Not after everything I'd done for her. It wasn't until the insurance process began, the photos, the paperwork, the $7,500 payout, that she showed her hand. She walked into my house days later, smiling, composed, and said it like it was the most reasonable thing in the world. "You'll give me the insurance money." I almost laughed. Then she told me the truth. She had done it. She had destroyed my car, my only reliable transportation, because I wouldn't hand her $5,000. That was the moment something in me turned to stone. The years of enabling, the sacrifices, the patience, it all ended right there. I realized Sarah had been right all along. Emily thought she'd forced my hand. She thought she'd outsmarted me. She thought the insurance payout was her victory. What she didn't know was that she had just given me all the ammunition I needed for the most effective lesson of her life. The human brain does a strange thing when faced with betrayal. It searches for loopholes. I sat in my armchair that night, staring at my phone's recording of Emily's confession, hoping I'd misheard her. That maybe she'd been joking, exaggerating, trying to shock me. But there it was, clear as day. You wouldn't give me the money, so I decided insurance would. No shame. No apology. Just a smug little shrug like she'd solved a tricky puzzle. And here's what made it worse. This wasn't some impulsive, heat-of-the-moment tantrum. No, this was calculated. She'd waited until I was out of town. She'd chosen a time when no one would be around. She'd even taken the time to smash every single panel, every single mirror, to make sure the insurance company would declare it a total loss. It was destruction with a business plan. That's when my mind started connecting dots I didn't want to connect. If she could do this, coldly, methodically, what else had she been capable of over the years? How many of her emergencies had been self-made? How many times had I cleaned up messes she'd deliberately created? The more I thought about it, the more the reality settled in. I wasn't dealing with a struggling daughter. I was dealing with someone who saw me as a resource to be exploited. And this wasn't just personal, it was criminal. In Illinois, vandalism of property over $500 is a Class A misdemeanor. Add in the fact that she intended to profit from an insurance payout. That creeps dangerously close to insurance fraud, a federal offense with serious consequences. But the emotional damage, that's what hit me the hardest. For 28 years, I had believed that no matter how bad things got, family would never cross certain lines. You could fight, you could disagree, you could even go months without talking, but you didn't destroy each other's lives for a payday. She had crossed that line without hesitation. And the arrogance, my God, the arrogance. Sitting on my couch, she'd said. You get your car replaced and now you have the cash I needed originally. It's perfect. Perfect. As if committing a crime against me was just another clever life hack. That night I couldn't sleep. My thoughts ran in endless loops. The years of sacrifice, the way Sarah used to warn me, the sound of Emily's voice when she said, "Just give me the check and we'll call it even." Even. Even would mean she returned every cent I'd given her since she turned 18. Even would mean she apologized and made amends. Even would mean she fixed what she broke, in my driveway and in our relationship. But Emily's version of even meant I'd take the loss, she'd take the money, and we'd pretend nothing happened. I realized then that ignoring this wasn't just about letting her off the hook for one bad decision. If I let this slide, I'd be telling her, and myself, that my love was so unconditional, it had no boundaries. That she could destroy my property, lie to me, manipulate me, and still walk away richer for it. That's not love. That's self-destruction disguised as parenting. By morning, I knew two things for certain. The money was staying in my account. Emily was going to face consequences she'd never forget. But here's the dangerous part of a decision like that. Once you commit to it, you're not just planning an emotional reaction. You're planning a strategy. I started making lists. Evidence. The recording of her confession, the insurance documents, the photos of the damage, the timestamps, the witness statement from my neighbor who'd heard the noise that night. I laid it all out like I was preparing for a trial. 'Cause, in a way, I was. This wasn't about yelling at her or cutting her off financially. That would have been too easy for her to dismiss. This was about showing her, in black and white legal terms, that her actions had weight. I didn't just want her to feel guilty. I wanted her to see her name on an official document that said defendant next to it. I wanted her to hold a piece of paper that detailed the damages she'd caused, the potential fines she faced, and the criminal implications hanging over her head. And deep down, a part of me hoped that maybe, just maybe, this would be the shock she needed to change. Because I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep being the parent who saved her from herself. Emily had burned the bridge. All I could do now was make sure she felt the heat. The first few days after Emily's confession, I moved through my house like a ghost. I'd catch myself replaying the conversation in my head, hearing her voice say those words over and over. "It was me, Dad. I destroyed your car." Some part of me kept waiting for a follow-up text, an apology, a moment of clarity where she'd realize the gravity of what she'd done. But nothing came. Instead, I saw her on social media. New clothes, dinners out with friends, not a shred of concern written on her face. She was living like the insurance payout was already in her hands. And that's when it hit me. She wasn't losing sleep over this. It was. That realization burned hotter than the betrayal itself. For years, I had been the one to carry the weight of her mistakes. The late bills, the bad decisions, the emergencies, that always seemed to appear at the worst possible time. I told myself it was love. That's what parents do. But as I sat in my study one evening, staring at the insurance check lying neatly inside its envelope, another thought pushed its way forward. Love without accountability isn't love at all. It's permission. And for 28 years, I had been giving Emily permission to fail without consequence. That was the real turning point. Not the destruction of my car. Not even her demand for the payout. No, it was the realization that I had been part of the problem. That I had been raising a woman who believed she could commit a crime against her own father and still expect to profit from it. I thought about Sarah. About all the nights she warned me. "Alex, we're not teaching her responsibility, we're teaching her dependency." I could almost hear her voice in that quiet room, urging me to do the hard thing. And for the first time I decided I would. That night I pulled out a legal pad, the same kind I used for work projects, and started making a different kind of list. Evidence. Audio recording of her confession, insurance paperwork, photos of the damage, timestamps from my phone, neighbor's statement. Legal grounds. Property destruction, attempted insurance fraud, emotional distress. Desired outcome. A consequence strong enough to make her change course, but not so severe it destroyed her entirely. I wasn't interested in sending my daughter to prison, but I was interested in making sure she understood that what she'd done wasn't just wrong. It was punishable, tangible, documented. I reached out to Bob Martinez, a colleague at the engineering firm, who had once mentioned his divorce attorney also handled other civil cases. Within the hour, I had a name and number. David Lloyd, civil litigation specialist. "Bring everything you have," David told me when I called. "If what you're saying is true, we can build a solid case." The next day, I sat in his office while he reviewed the evidence. He didn't look shocked. He looked methodical. "This isn't just about money," he said, tapping his pen against the desk. "It's about boundaries. You've been trying to teach her through support. Now it's time to teach her through consequence." We mapped out the strategy. A civil lawsuit for $10,000 in damages. Legal service delivered directly to her. No warning, no softening the blow. The message would be clear. You went too far, and now you're accountable. I walked out of that office feeling different, lighter. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't reacting to Emily's actions. I was acting on my own terms. Back home, I placed the manila envelope containing the lawsuit paperwork on my desk. Just seeing it there gave me a strange sense of control, like I'd finally stopped being the parent she could manipulate with a few well-placed tears. But here's the part that made it satisfying. I wasn't just going to serve her the papers. I was going to let her walk right into it. When she inevitably called asking about the insurance money, and I knew she would, I'd invite her over. I'd tell her we could work something out. I'd even offer lunch. And when she sat down in my living room expecting a check, I'd hand her that envelope instead. I could already picture her face shifting from smug confidence to dawning horror as she realized the reality. This wasn't revenge for the sake of payback. This was a correction. A line in the sand that said, "You don't get to hurt me and walk away richer for it." And for the first time I was okay with the fact that my daughter might hate me for it. Because maybe, just maybe, she'd also respect me for it one day. The plan came together the way an engineer builds a bridge. One piece at a time, every step supporting the next. Step 1 was documentation. Every photo of the car damage was printed and time-stamped. The audio file of Emily's confession was transcribed word for word. The insurance claim paperwork, the payout check, the neighbor's statement, all organized into a manila folder so tight and precise it could have been an exhibit in a courtroom. Step 2 was legal leverage. David Lloyd drafted a civil lawsuit for $10,000 in damages, enough to reflect the seriousness of her actions, but not so crushing it would be impossible for her to recover. We included property destruction with photographic evidence, attempted insurance fraud with her verbal admission, emotional distress, the aftermath of finding my only transportation destroyed. David explained that even if the case didn't go to trial, just receiving the papers would force Emily to confront the reality of what she'd done. And if she refused to cooperate, we'd file the case formally, and her name would appear in public court records. Step 3 was the setup. This was the part that had to be handled with surgical precision. Emily couldn't know what was coming. If she sensed even a hint of my plan, she'd either avoid me or find some way to manipulate the situation. So I waited. I didn't reach out to her. I didn't post about the insurance payout. I let her imagination do the work. The longer she believed I was quietly preparing to hand her the check, the more confident and careless she would become. It didn't take long. 3 days later my phone rang. Her voice was light, almost cheerful. "Dad, any news from the insurance yet?" I kept my tone deliberately neutral. "The check came through. We should talk." Just as I expected, she jumped at the offer. "Finally. How much did they give you?" "Enough. Why don't you come by Thursday afternoon? We'll have lunch and discuss it properly." There was a pause, then that same self-assured laugh I'd heard too many times before. "Perfect. This will solve everything, Dad. You'll see." Oh, I'd see, all right. Step 4 was presentation. This wasn't going to be a shouting match. There'd be no slammed doors or screaming across the living room. I wanted her to understand that this wasn't emotional retaliation. It was the calm, deliberate application of consequences. The envelope containing the lawsuit would be on my side table, sealed and waiting. I'd hand it to her the way you hand someone a gift. I'd let her open it herself, read the first few lines, and watch as realization sank in. The key was silence. Let the words on the page do the damage. Let her brain fill in the rest. The impact on her credit, her job prospects, the possibility of court fees. Let her feel the ground shift under her feet the same way it had for me when she confessed. Step 5 was conditions. I didn't just want to punish her. I wanted to give her a path forward, but one that required actual effort. Counseling, employment, restitution payments, proof of progress. And if she didn't follow through, the lawsuit would proceed without hesitation. By the time Thursday arrived, every detail was locked in. Lawsuit drafted and ready. Envelope sealed. Script rehearsed in my mind. I even left the destroyed Ford Explorer in the driveway, visible from the living room window, its shattered windshield catching the afternoon light like a mirror reflecting her choices. When she knocked on the door, I didn't rush to answer. I let her wait a moment, a subtle reminder that she was entering my space on my terms. And as I reached for the envelope, I felt something I hadn't felt since the day Sarah died. Complete clarity. This wasn't revenge for the sake of hurting her. This was a correction. Pivot point. The kind of moment that, if she was wise, would split her life into before and after. And if she wasn't wise, well, that's what courtrooms are for. Before Thursday came, I found myself thinking about other times I'd seen people walk away from consequences, and how much damage that did in the long run. The first was a man I used to work with at the engineering firm, Tom Dillard. Solid worker but terrible with deadlines. 4 years the project managers covered for him, making excuses, shifting schedules. Tom never faced the fallout, so his habits never changed. Then one quarter a big client left because of delays. Tom was shocked to be fired. He told me later, "If someone had called me out years ago, maybe I'd have done better." It stuck with me. How the absence of consequences didn't protect him. It destroyed him. The second example hit closer to home. My neighbor across the street, Mr. Ramirez, once told me about his nephew. Bright kid, but prone to borrowing money from family without paying it back. The relatives would complain, but no one confronted him, until he took $8,000 from his grandmother's savings to invest in a business. The business never existed. That time the family pressed charges. The nephew didn't speak to them for a year, but when he came back, he had a steady job and a clean record. "He hated me for making him face it," Mr. Ramirez said. "But now, he thanks me for it." And then there was Sarah's story, one she told me years ago, back when Emily was still in high school. A college roommate of hers had been the kind of friend everyone felt sorry for. Always broke, always in some sort of drama. People would hand her money just to make the problem go away. Then one day, that roommate stole from a campus fundraiser and was caught on camera. She was expelled. Sarah told me, if someone had told her no earlier, maybe she wouldn't have crossed that line. All 3 stories had one thread in common. Without consequences, people push boundaries until they shatter something. A job, a relationship, a law. I thought about Emily in that context. 4 years I had been her safety net, but instead of bouncing back, she'd just learned to fall more carelessly. This time the fall had to hurt, not to destroy her, but to make her think twice before climbing the same ladder again. That's why the lawsuit wasn't just for me. It was for her future. If she learned this lesson now, maybe she wouldn't end up like Tom, blindsided by reality. Or like Mr. Ramirez's nephew, losing family trust entirely. Or like Sarah's roommate, ruining her own life because no one stopped her sooner. Some viewers might think, but she's your daughter. Isn't this too harsh? I'd ask them this. What's harsher? Serving her a lawsuit now, or watching her face a prison sentence 10 years from now because she thought she could get away with something worse? In the end, I realized these examples weren't just stories. They were warnings. And I was done ignoring warnings. Thursday wasn't going to be comfortable. It wasn't going to be easy. But I had seen what happened when you let someone walk away without consequences. And I wasn't going to let Emily become another cautionary tale I told years down the line saying, if only I'd done something when I had the chance. By the time Thursday morning rolled around, every detail was locked into place. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision anymore. It was a well-engineered sequence of actions designed to land with maximum impact. I left the Ford Explorer exactly where it had been since the night I came home from New York. Parked in the driveway, its windshield spiderwebbed, its tires flat, its body still scarred with those deliberate blows. I wanted it to be the first thing Emily saw when she pulled in, a visual reminder of the reason we were meeting. Inside, the living room was spotless. The coffee table was clear except for 2 things. A plate of sandwiches and the sealed manila envelope containing the lawsuit. The envelope sat on the side table to my right, positioned so I could reach it without breaking eye contact when the time came. The night before, I'd called Emily with a tone as neutral as I could manage. No hints of tension, no trace of anger. Just calm, almost casual. Come by around 2. We'll have lunch and talk about the insurance. I could hear the relief in her voice. The way her mood brightened instantly. Perfect. This will solve everything, Dad. You'll see. That false confidence was exactly what I wanted her to bring to the meeting. At 3:15 p.m., Her car rolled into the driveway with the confidence of someone pulling up to collect a prize. She stepped out dressed like she was meeting friends for brunch. Designer jacket, spotless boots, hair perfectly styled. She didn't glance twice at the car she'd destroyed. Her knock was quick and impatient, the kind of knock that says, "I'm here, open up." When I opened the door, I greeted her the same way I had when she was a teenager coming home from school. "Come on in, Emily." I made sure my voice gave away nothing. She sank into the couch, crossing her legs and placing her purse neatly beside her, ready to slip the check inside when I handed it over. She glanced around, taking in the tidy room and the food on the table, probably thinking this was going to be quick and easy. We made small talk for a few minutes. I asked about her week, her car, her apartment. She answered, but I could tell her attention kept drifting toward the envelope on the table beside me. Finally, she leaned forward. "So, the insurance money." I picked up the manila envelope and held it out to her. She took it with both hands, smiling as if she'd already won. Her nails made a soft clicking sound against the paper as she opened it, pulling out the neatly stapled packet inside. The smile faded almost instantly. Her eyes scanned the heading, civil complaint, and then flicked to the first line. Plaintiff, Alex Green. Defendant, Emily Green. Her forehead creased. She read further, lips moving silently over words like property destruction, insurance fraud attempt, and emotional distress. When she reached the damages section, $10,000, the color drained from her face. She looked up at me, the confidence gone. "Dad, what is this?" I leaned back in my chair, keeping my tone even. "It's a lawsuit, Emily. For what you did to my car." For a moment she didn't speak. Her eyes darted back to the paper, as if maybe she'd misread it. Her fingers tightened around the packet. I let the silence stretch, forcing her to sit with the reality of what she was holding. When she finally spoke, her voice was smaller. "You're suing me. Your own daughter. Actions have consequences," I said simply. She tried to argue, to spin it the way she always had. "It was just a car. The insurance covered it. No one got hurt." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't take the bait. "You destroyed my property on purpose, Emily. That's a crime. And you expected me to reward you for it." Her eyes flicked to the window, to the ruined car outside, and I saw it, the first crack in her composure. When she looked back at me, there was no smugness left, only fear. At that point, I knew the groundwork was complete. The next step wasn't about me pushing harder. It was about letting her feel the weight of what she'd done until she started looking for a way to make it right. And that was when the real negotiation, the one I'd been planning for weeks, could begin. As Emily sat there clutching the lawsuit papers, her expression shifting from disbelief to panic, I realized something important. She hadn't woken up one morning and decided to become the kind of person who smashes her father's car for a payday. No, she'd gotten there step by step, mistake by mistake, trap by trap. And the scary part, most of those traps were ones I had helped set. Trap number 1. Believing love means rescuing someone every time. It sounds noble, stepping in whenever a loved one is in trouble. But over the years, I had trained Emily to see me as her emergency exit from any bad decision. Instead of letting her face the discomfort of her own mistakes, I'd shielded her from them. The danger. If someone never feels the sting of consequences, they stop believing those consequences exist. That's how you end up with someone thinking insurance fraud is just a clever solution. Trap number 2. Confusing excuses for explanations. Emily was a master of presenting her problems as the unavoidable result of bad luck, not her own actions. The landlord was out to get her. The job was toxic. The car breakdown was just bad timing. Each time, I accepted the explanation without pressing for accountability. Over time, that pattern taught her that as long as she could wrap her mistakes in a story, she'd avoid responsibility. Trap number 3. Ignoring the small red flags. Before she took a bat to my car, there were smaller incidents. Little white lies about how she spent money I'd lent her. Broken promises to pay me back. Overdraft fees she hid until they spiraled into something bigger. I treated those as minor annoyances, not warnings. I told myself, at least it's not something serious. The truth. Small breaches of trust are often the dress rehearsals for bigger ones. Trap number 4. Letting fear of conflict override the need for boundaries. The reason I kept bailing her out wasn't just love, it was fear. Fear of an argument. Fear of her pulling away. Fear of being the bad guy. But here's the thing. Boundaries that aren't enforced aren't really boundaries. They're just suggestions. And people who are desperate or entitled will always test suggestions until they break. Trap number 5. Believing it could never happen in my family. When you hear about families torn apart by money, betrayal, or legal battles, it's easy to think, that could never be us. Thought that too. I thought the love between a father and daughter was an unbreakable shield. But trust doesn't vanish in a single dramatic moment. It erodes slowly, until one day the person you thought you knew is standing in your living room, confessing to a crime and expecting a reward for it. As I watched Emily read through the complaint, I could see her beginning to understand something I had failed to teach her for 28 years. When you cross certain lines, there is no reset button. There are only consequences. I wasn't giving her this lesson out of cruelty. I was giving it to her because if she didn't learn it here with me, she'd learn it somewhere far less forgiving. Maybe in a courtroom full of strangers, or in a jail cell, or after burning the last bridge she had left. So when I speak to anyone listening to this story, I say this. Don't fall into the traps I did. Don't confuse love with endless rescue missions. Don't ignore the red flags because you hope they'll fade on their own. Don't wait until the damage is irreversible to draw the line. Because if you do, you might find yourself exactly where I was. Staring at someone you love, realizing you have to choose between keeping the peace today or saving them from themselves tomorrow. Chose tomorrow. I've been asked before, in conversations with friends, even by the attorney, what I hoped to get out of all this. Was it just about the money? The punishment? The satisfaction of watching Emily's confidence crumble? Well, the truth is, I wasn't thinking about the next week or the next month. I was thinking about the next 10 years. Because this wasn't just about a smashed car. It was about stopping a pattern before it destroyed her completely. I pictured 2 different futures. Future number 1. The path without change. If I let her walk away with the insurance money, she'd keep going the way she had for years. She'd run into the next financial wall. Maybe a missed rent payment, maybe another job lost, and she'd come back to me. And I'd give again, and again, and again, until the day I couldn't, and she'd look at me with the same anger she had that night in my kitchen, accusing me of not loving her. Worse still, she might start crossing bigger lines. If destroying my property for insurance money was justifiable in her mind, what would be next? Lying on loan applications. Using someone else's identity. One wrong step in that direction, and she'd be in a courtroom, except the judge wouldn't be her father, and the consequences wouldn't come with a safety net. Future number 2. The path with change. If she took this lesson seriously, the outcome could be very different. I pictured her sitting in a counselor's office, talking through why she made reckless decisions. I pictured her showing up for a steady job, even if it wasn't glamorous, and learning the pride that comes from earning her own paycheck. I pictured her paying back that $500 deductible, one $50 payment at a time, each one a small but tangible reminder that she had the power to repair what she'd damaged. And maybe, just maybe, I pictured us sitting together one day, years from now, and her saying, "Dad, I hated you for what you did. But you were right." That second future was the one I was betting on. I didn't know if she'd take the opportunity, but I knew I had to give her the chance. Because while consequences can be painful, they can also be the doorway to a completely different life. It wouldn't be immediate. Real change never is. There would be backslides, arguments, moments where she'd test the boundaries again. But the difference this time was that the boundaries would hold. As for me, I'd finally be free from the silent fear that had been building for years, the fear of what she might do next if I didn't keep saving her. I'd stop feeling like I had to choose between my own stability and her comfort. I'd also be able to look at Sarah's photo and know, without a doubt, that I'd finally taken her advice. I'd finally chosen accountability over enabling. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy for either of us. But when I pictured Emily a year from now, working, paying her bills, standing on her own feet, I realized something. This wasn't just revenge. This was the last, best gift I could give her. Emily didn't leave that afternoon with a check. She left with a signed agreement, tear-stained cheeks, and the knowledge that her father wasn't someone she could manipulate anymore. I watched her walk down the driveway past the destroyed Ford Explorer, the very thing she thought would make her rich, and I realized it had made her something else entirely. Aware. She'd felt fear. She'd felt shame. But she'd also been handed a way forward, one she had to build herself. For me, the revenge wasn't in the lawsuit. It was in seeing the entitlement drain from her face, replaced by the understanding that choices have weight. That love without boundaries is just another form of neglect. Sarah was right all along. Accountability isn't cruelty. It's care in its truest form. So no, I didn't give my daughter the insurance money. I gave her something better. And if you take one thing from my story, let it be this. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do is let the consequences speak.